Never consider anything a true gain if it forces you to betray your integrity or destroy your self-respect. Have you ever felt like nothing could shake you until one woman did not with a slap or a scream or a betrayal, but with something far quieter, a smile, a single glance, one perfectly timed silence? You were steady, in control, maybe even invincible, focused on your goals, disciplined in your habits, clear in your mission. You weren't weak. You weren't needy. You were building, climbing, winning. And then she came into your life. At first, she didn't demand anything. She didn't need to. She saw you, not like the world does, not like another man does, but with warmth, with admiration, with a kind of awe that made you feel like more than just a man, like a hero. That's where it begins. In that exact moment when your heart softens and your guard begins to lower. And if you're not aware of it, you won't even notice what you're handing over. Not money, not time, something far more dangerous, the key to your mind. Marcus Aurelius warned about this kind of power, not because he feared women, but because he understood the quiet influence they held over even the strongest of men. And today, we're going to break that open, not to blame, not to fear, but to understand what makes you bend and how to stand again. No matter how hardened a man becomes, no matter how many battles he's fought on the battlefield, in business or within himself, there is always one place left untouched by armor, a quiet space, a soft spot. And it's not weakness, it's not fragility, it's human. It's the part of him that wants to be seen not as a machine, not as a provider, not as a name on a resume, but as a man with a soul. That place might be buried under years of discipline, shaped by pain, camouflaged by pride, but it never disappears. Even the Stoic ones, the silent, calculated, unshakable types have it. Even the ones who have trained themselves to detach, to lead without emotion, to walk through fire without flinching. They carry it. That subtle longing. The desire to be appreciated not for what they do, but for who they are. For being strong, yes, but also for being human. Most men won't admit it. They've been taught to suppress that part, to bury vulnerability beneath achievements, to build empires as proof they don't need affection. But inside, behind every controlled expression and carefully guarded boundary, there's still a voice whispering, "I want to matter. I want someone to believe in me." That voice isn't shameful. It isn't a flaw. Marcus Aurelius himself felt it. He ruled an empire and still knew that inside every man lies a part that hopes not to be idolized, but simply to be seen. And that's the spot that makes men human. It's also the spot that makes them bend. Because once someone touches that place, the right smile, the right words, it's not the body that yields. It's the heart. And that's where the story truly begins. It doesn't take force. It doesn't take shouting or conflict or grand gestures. A woman can reach the softest place inside a man without raising her voice, without demanding anything, often without even knowing she's doing it. Her power is different. It's quiet, but it's real. And it cuts through everything, through muscle, through pride, through silence. It slips between the armor not with violence, but with warmth. All it takes is one look, one moment where she pauses and holds his gaze like he's the only man in the room. One sentence spoken in a tone that says, "I see you," not just the surface you. And suddenly the part of him he's kept locked away, the one that wants to feel chosen, admired, respected, begins to stir. That's the genius of her presence. She doesn't need to fight her way in. Her power comes from understanding how a man wants to feel, especially the strong ones. The ones who carry responsibility, the ones who walk through the world as protectors, providers, stoics. These men crave something rare, to be disarmed without being diminished. And women in their nature often know exactly how to offer that moment. She might do it with a smile that lingers just long enough, with a compliment that feels like it was meant for the soul, not the ego, with a hand resting on his shoulder in a way that says, "You're not alone." In that brief exchange, a man who was once impenetrable can find himself moved, humbled, open, not because she forced her way in, but because she knew where to touch. Marcus Aurelius knew this kind of power wasn't physical, it was emotional, psychological. And if a man doesn't recognize it, if he doesn't guard the doorway to that inner world, he may hand over the keys to someone who never asked for them out loud. At first, it feels harmless, beautiful even. That soft moment when a woman looks at you not with judgment, not with expectation, but with belief. It's rare. And when it happens, something in you relaxes. The tension in your chest fades. You feel noticed, chosen, maybe even understood. It's a powerful moment for any man, especially one who has lived most of his life unseen. And so you let her in, not all at once. It starts small. You begin to care about what she thinks. You start noticing how your words land with her. You start trying not just to be yourself, but to be the version of yourself that makes her eyes light up. The man who keeps her approval. The man who keeps that feeling alive. And slowly, you shift. Not because she asked you to. Not because she controls you. But because that feeling of being valued, being admired is like oxygen, and you start changing your rhythm to keep breathing it in. That's the hidden cost of emotional connection. When a man isn't grounded in himself, it becomes the unseen point of leverage. Marcus Aurelius warned men to guard their minds, not because emotions are bad, but because the mind is where decisions are born. And once your sense of worth is tied to how she sees you, your choices no longer belong solely to you. You stop living from purpose and start living from reaction. This isn't about blaming her. It's about seeing the shift before it owns you. Because the moment you live to keep her admiration, you're no longer leading. You're chasing. And even if she never says a word, the power dynamic has changed. That's not romance. That's surrender. Marcus Aurelius ruled over an empire, but he understood that the most difficult empire to govern was the one within, not Rome, the mind. He wrote in his meditations, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." That wasn't just poetic wisdom, it was a survival code. Because Marcus knew something most modern men forget. If you lose control of your thoughts, you've already surrendered everything else. In today's world, we talk about boundaries, physical ones, digital ones, social ones. But the boundary most often left unguarded is the internal one, the mind. It's not that we don't know it exists, it's that we underestimate how subtly it can be breached. A woman doesn't need to raise her voice, lay a hand on you, or give ultimatums. All she needs is presence, well-timed silence, a glance filled with warmth, or words that drip admiration. And before you know it, your mind is no longer yours. It's slowly bending to the idea of keeping that attention, preserving that smile, earning that admiration again. That's the shift Marcus warned about. Not because women are dangerous, but because their emotional intelligence is potent. They can touch parts of you no one else can reach, and with that access comes power. If you're not guarding your inner dialogue, if you're not watching the thoughts that rise when she praises or withholds, you're living a life dictated by external cues. And once someone else has access to your emotions, they have influence over your decisions, your pace, your priorities, even your values. Marcus Aurelius didn't call for isolation. He called for clarity. He understood that love is not the danger unconscious surrender is. So guard your mind like it's sacred. Because it is. Every man wants to feel respected. That's not weakness, it's biology. It's spiritual. It's embedded in our nature. From the time we're boys, we're taught that strength matters, but we're rarely told the truth. that what we crave just as deeply is to be seen as strong, especially through the eyes of a woman. One smile, one compliment, one look of admiration from her can make a man feel invincible. But that's the paradox. The very thing that makes us feel powerful can also be what takes our power away. When a woman shows that she believes in you, it lights something inside, something ancient, something primal. It feels like purpose, like confirmation that you're doing something right. And so, without noticing it, you start orienting your behavior toward maintaining that approval. You become more aware of how she reacts to you. You start adjusting. You start shaping yourself not based on what you believe, but based on what will keep her looking at you that way. That's the danger, not love, not connection, but the silent transaction where your identity becomes a response to her approval. Marcus Aurelius would have called this a misplacement of power, because once your worth depends on how someone else sees you, you've handed over the keys to your own self-respect. And the worst part, it doesn't feel like surrender. It feels like intimacy. That's why so many men don't see it happening. Her words, her attention, her admiration. These things are beautiful, but they should never be your oxygen. They should never be the source of your masculinity. Because when you need her to see you as worthy before you believe it yourself, you're no longer standing on your own foundation. You're standing on hers, and it can shift at any moment. Sometimes it's not what she says, it's what she doesn't. The silence, that quiet moment when the warmth disappears from her tone, when her gaze turns inward, when her replies shrink into nothing. And suddenly, you're not dealing with a woman. You're dealing with a question you can't answer. A question that echoes in your mind. Did I mess up? Is she upset? Is she testing me? You've faced bigger challenges. You've handled stress pressure, even betrayal. But nothing hits harder than emotional uncertainty. Her silence becomes a mirror, and in it, you start to see your own self-doubt. Your mind rushes to fill the gap. You begin replaying your words, your actions, your tone. You start interpreting the smallest changes in her energy like clues in a game you never signed up to play. Marcus Aurelius understood this kind of trap. He knew the human mind hates ambiguity, that when we don't know what someone else is thinking, our imagination builds the worst possible scenario. Her silence doesn't have to be manipulative to be powerful. It just has to exist. And if you aren't grounded, it becomes louder than any spoken insult. That's how she gains power without ever raising her voice. Because the moment you start reacting to the silence, chasing the meaning behind it, adjusting yourself to restore the connection, you've handed her the emotional lead. You're no longer moving from inner clarity. You're reacting from inner chaos. But Marcus would remind you, strength is not tested in noise. It's revealed in silence. When she grows quiet, don't rush to fill the gap. Don't panic. Don't lose yourself trying to decode what may not even be about you. Hold your ground. Let her silence remain hers. And protect your mind from turning a pause into a prison. Because in that stillness, your real strength is either broken or born. There's a difference between enjoying her approval and needing it. One is connection. The other is captivity. And most men don't see the line until they've crossed it. It starts subtly. She says, "I'm proud of you," and something inside lights up. Not just your pride, but your sense of identity. You feel worthy, whole, like all your work finally means something. But what happens when that approval is withdrawn, when she's distant, distracted, or unimpressed, not out of cruelty, but because life moves? Suddenly your strength feels fragile, dependent, shaky. That's the trap. It's not her fault for giving you praise. It's not wrong to feel good when someone sees your effort. But the moment you need her words to feel valuable, you've handed over the steering wheel of your self-worth. And when she realizes this even unconsciously, it shifts the dynamic. She now holds emotional leverage over your confidence. You're no longer standing tall on your own convictions. You're measuring your worth by her mood. Marcus Aurelius warned men to anchor themselves in thought, not emotion. To build an identity so rooted in internal clarity that no one else's approval, no matter how sweet, can redefine who you are. Because when a man becomes addicted to admiration, he becomes easy to shape, easy to lead, easy to lose. And what's terrifying is how good it feels at first. Her praise feels like fuel. Her attention feels like fire. But you weren't meant to be powered by someone else's applause. That kind of energy runs out. And when it does, so does your sense of self. A strong man doesn't reject love. He simply refuses to be rebuilt by it. His power comes from within. So even if she stays silent, turns away, or forgets to remind him of his greatness, he still knows who he is. And that's what makes him unbreakable. Not every trap is made of barbed wire. Some are made of velvet. And the most dangerous ones are wrapped in kindness. When a woman says, "You're the only one who really understands me," or "You're different from the others," it feels like a blessing. It lands softly, like truth. It makes you feel chosen, set apart, almost heroic. Suddenly, you're no longer just a man. You're her refuge, her exception, the one she trusts when she trusts no one else. And that feels incredible until it becomes a chain, because now you're not living for your mission. You're living to stay in that role. You're not asking, "Is this right for me?" You're asking, "How do I keep being the man she believes in?" And in that question, you begin to drift from your purpose, your priorities, even your values. The praise wasn't poison, it was power. And if you're unaware of how it shapes you, you'll start editing yourself to keep the admiration flowing. You'll suppress your truth to maintain her fantasy. You'll start bending softly, quietly, until you look in the mirror and no longer recognize the man staring back. Marcus Aurelius warned against this exact dynamic. He wrote, "Don't be distracted by applause or upset by criticism. Remain rooted in yourself, because both praise and blame are external forces. They are winds that can sway a man unless he anchors deeply. The most subtle manipulation isn't cruelty, it's approval that becomes addictive. When her sweet words become the lens through which you view yourself, you no longer own your reflection. You've outsourced your identity. True strength isn't rejecting praise, it's receiving it without becoming a slave to it. Smile when she compliments you. Let it warm you but not define you. Because the man who can't live without sweet words is the man most easily broken by silence. There's a kind of laughter that doesn't feel like joy. It feels like a cut, a moment where you expected warmth but received something colder, sharper. You told a truth, revealed a vulnerability, or made a mistake, and she laughed. Not always cruelly, not always consciously. But something about it made you shrink, made you question whether your softness was a mistake. That sting you feel, that's not weakness, that's exposure. And what many men fail to realize is this: her laughter in those moments is often not rejection, it's a test. She wants to see what you'll do with it. Will you collapse? Get defensive? Apologize for being human? Or will you hold your center, steady your breath, and keep your spine intact? Marcus Aurelius would say, "The obstacle is the way," meaning what hurts you is not your enemy, it's your path. Her laughter might bruise your ego, but it also offers a mirror. It shows you where you're still seeking approval, where you're still fragile, where your sense of self is still built on sand instead of stone. You have a choice in that moment. You can let it define you, or you can let it refine you. If you crumble every time you feel embarrassed, she'll know your confidence was only surface deep. But if you can remain calm, maybe even smile, not with spite, but with stillness, you prove that your worth isn't shaped by her reactions. This doesn't mean closing off your heart. It means reinforcing your foundation, because the man who can stand tall when she tests his spirit is the man she can never truly diminish. He doesn't fear her laughter, not because it can't hurt, but because it can't change who he is. And that's the kind of man who becomes unshakable, not by denying his pain, but by standing inside it with strength. Not all games are played with malice. Some are played with mirrors. Some are played in silence, in softness, in moments so subtle they don't look like games at all. But they are. Because human beings, especially those who understand emotion, learn quickly what works. And many women, whether they realize it or not, learn how to test the emotional architecture of a man's identity without ever raising their voice. It's not manipulation in the way most people define it. It's observation. She sees how you react when she praises you. She notices how quickly your posture shifts when she sheds a tear. She observes what makes you hesitate when she goes quiet, and what makes you try harder when she laughs at your weakness. In those moments, she's learning. Not always to control you, but to understand what makes you strong and what makes you fold. Marcus Aurelius said, "Know yourself first before you know others." Because if you don't know your own triggers, your own emotional needs, your own weak points, someone else will find them for you, not out of cruelty, but out of instinct. And if you remain unaware, you'll be playing a game you didn't know you entered, one where the rules keep changing and your self-respect hangs in the balance. This isn't about blaming women. It's about recognizing patterns. It's about understanding that emotional intimacy isn't always safe by default. It must be earned through awareness and mutual respect. A woman who tests your reactions may not even know she's doing it, but your job as a man is to notice what's being revealed. The man who knows himself doesn't fear these games because he's no longer a piece on the board. He's the player, calm, steady, and unshaken by what was meant to unbalance him. Before you try to understand her moods, her silences, her games, or her affections, ask yourself this: do you even understand your own? Because that's where most men fall, not from lack of intelligence, but from lack of inner clarity. They spend their lives reacting to women instead of responding from grounded awareness. And that difference is everything. When she smiles, and it makes you feel alive, do you know why? When she cries, and it makes you want to fix everything, do you understand what part of you can't stand to see her hurt? When she laughs at your vulnerability and it shakes you, do you recognize the wound it touches? Marcus Aurelius said, "It is not events that disturb us, but our judgment about them." You can't control her emotions. You can't decode her every move. But you can control how much of your identity is exposed to influence. And that begins by knowing your own mind before you hand it over to anyone else. Most men think strength is about being impenetrable. But real strength is about being internally clear. When you know what you believe in, what matters to you, what your emotional boundaries are, you stop being so easily shaped by someone else's attention, approval, or rejection. Her emotions stop becoming a test you need to pass, and instead become something you can witness without being consumed. That's the difference between a man who reacts and a man who leads. Because when you don't know yourself, her affection becomes a mirror, her silence becomes a threat, and her approval becomes your drug. But the man who knows himself, his mission, his values, his emotional triggers, can look into her eyes and remain unmoved, not out of coldness, but out of truth. He doesn't need her to validate him, because he's already met himself and made peace with who he is. There is no fortress more important than your own mind, not your money, not your body, not your reputation, because when your mind is compromised, everything else follows. Marcus Aurelius understood this deeply. He wasn't just warning against distraction, he was pointing to the core of masculine identity. You have power over your mind, not outside events. And yet, how many men today live completely ruled by outside forces, especially emotional ones? Her smile makes you hopeful. Her silence makes you spiral. Her approval becomes your compass. And suddenly, your thoughts are no longer your own. You start waking up, not with clarity, but with anxiety, not asking, "What must I do today?" but wondering, "What does she think of me today?" That is mental captivity. And it doesn't require chains or control, it only takes emotional dependence. The truth is, a woman doesn't need to manipulate you to influence you. If you're not guarding your mind, your imagination will do the job for her. You'll interpret her silence as punishment. You'll rewrite your behavior just to keep her interested. You'll obsess over meaning in every word, every shift in tone, and while you're doing that, you're not leading your life. You're reacting to hers. Guarding your mind means becoming aware of what gets in, what words take root, what fantasies distort your clarity. It means understanding that even beautiful emotions can become traps when you let them write your identity for you. A strong man doesn't fear love. He just refuses to build his sense of self on it. He creates space between her mood and his mission, between her emotion and his decisions. Because when the mind is protected, no praise can intoxicate and no rejection can dismantle. And that's when you become truly unbreakable, not because you resist emotion, but because you command your response to it. Every man has something sacred. It's not his body, not his bank account, not even his reputation. It's his mind. The place where decisions are born, where purpose is shaped, where identity takes root. The moment you let someone else dictate what you think, how you feel, or who you are, you've surrendered the most important possession you'll ever have. And for many men, that surrender doesn't come with a fight. It comes quietly, through a smile, a compliment, a need for approval that begins soft and ends with total self-abandonment. Marcus Aurelius said, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." So what happens when those thoughts aren't yours anymore? What happens when your mind is no longer a sovereign place but a stage for someone else's expectations? You lose yourself. You lose clarity. You lose the strength that made you valuable in the first place. This doesn't mean you don't love. It doesn't mean you close yourself off or turn cold. But it does mean that love cannot come at the cost of self-betrayal. It does mean that the key to your emotional world must remain in your hands. Because once you give it away, once you allow another person, no matter how beautiful, how kind, or how close, to define how you see yourself, you are no longer living. You're following. You're adjusting. You're molding your soul to fit someone else's perception. The man who refuses to give away that key is not hardened, he's awakened. He doesn't fear emotion. He respects it. He doesn't reject love. He receives it, but never lets it build the architecture of his identity. Because he knows the truth. If you lose your mind, you lose everything. But if you guard it, if you protect that sacred space, you become the kind of man who cannot be broken, only chosen. In a world that constantly tells men to be strong, we often confuse silence with strength and emotional numbness with control. But the deeper truth, the one Marcus Aurelius pointed to, is that real strength begins with ownership of your mind, not your paycheck, not your physique, not even your ability to endure pain. Your thoughts, your responses, your emotional boundaries. The lesson is simple but profound. Never hand someone else the key to how you see yourself. It's easy to feel powerful when a woman admires you, supports you, or makes you feel like a hero. But that feeling, if not grounded in self-awareness, can quickly become dependency. And the moment your identity relies on her approval, your confidence is no longer yours. You've outsourced it. This doesn't mean shutting yourself off from love connection or emotion. It means remembering this: her love can be beautiful, but it should never be your foundation. You must build your self-worth on something unshakable, on clarity, principle, and a deep understanding of who you are without applause. Because the man who knows himself, who guards his mind, who stays calm in the face of emotional storms, that man doesn't just survive modern relationships, he leads them. And that's the kind of man the world and women respect most.